You know how Trump has talked about, since the first term when he ran, um, about common sense. It really disappeared when the church created its structure. It's a shame. They make a lot of excuses, but I mean, the problem, and the reason I say that is because I think much of the reason Jesus said, he was the teacher, is because you would seek him. And in seeking him, you're going to think. He's going to make sure you think. That's how that interaction goes. When you create the church structure, you create the hierarchy. And then rather than people seeking God, they just listen to whatever the leader says. The Catholic Church, of course, it's not like they ever take any responsibility for being wrong about anything, and they're wrong about so much. They claim that many people were illiterate. Well, that's clearly not true, because the Protestants came to America with the Geneva Bible. So, that's Old World English. So they clearly were not all illiterate. That's a ton of them not illiterate. It was that they couldn't read Latin. But they didn't want to put it in English. They never take any responsibility. But it's really sad, because the more I think about it, the more I realize the key was not having the church in many ways, because then nobody's thinking, they're just following what the leader says, because they must know it best. The fallout with the Protestants was literally because when they did get their hands on English, in the Old World English, they were like, what have you been teaching us in the church? You lied to us. The betrayal was on such a mass scale that for any dirtbag to carry on about the Protestant and the Reformation, it's like you're an idiot and you lack common sense. That's a huge betrayal. It's really the first biggest betrayal of many that would come from the Catholic Church and even other churches, but all because of the church. How they ever got away with claiming that, they took and twisted what Jesus said to Peter, clearly obvious that didn't mean the actual building, and then decided to follow Paul instead of Jesus. And they've gotten away with it to this day, they do. But that's the beginning of when common sense declined. Because and in that place, in the Church of England back then, they would point to the stained glass windows, and the priest would just tell them whatever they were trained to tell them, and because it was in Latin, they couldn't read it. But then when they read, they got it was like they totally lied to them. That was ultimately what led King James the First to do the King James Version, is you lied to all of us. Because as long as it's not in English, all we have to go on is what you say. It's sad. And yet then you have Catholics that defend that bullshit and that make excuses for it. But it's really what led to the no thinking. I mean, that was the most important thing to God, is that he was going to keep you thinking. He wanted you seeking him, not seeking the Pope, not seeking the church. He wanted you seeking him. I mean, you can understand it with the Protestants back then. They had no way of knowing, okay? And at least, I think in the beginning, they were really thinking, once they realized what the word really said, and then God bringing them here, and it was the beginning of, some common sense returning. And then, by 1776, you had the Enlightenment group that believed that to get people to have common sense again, there has to be, it's like all this stuff that really Jesus had the answer for to begin with, and the church took it away. And they never take any responsibility. I mean, they will someday. I mean, God will make sure of it. But, so I was looking into this, and it said that the formation of church hierarchies, particularly in early Christianity and the Catholic tradition, shifted authority from direct personal seeking of God to mediated institutional structures, potentially eroding individual spiritual reasoning and common sense. Critics argue this created a loveless power dynamic where believers deferred thinking to clergy, fostering arrogance, fear-mongering, and reliance on a top-down commands rather than covenant-based personal relationship with God. This transition, evident post-apostle era, replaced communal discernment with rigid law and order systems, diminishing the layperson's role in interpreting scripture or moral truths independently. Reformation thinkers and modern Protestant voices, like those echoing Martin Luther, viewed hierarchies as barriers to priesthood of all believers, leading to spiritual laziness, where people stopped prayerfully seeking divine wisdom, right? Scandals and abuses with hierarchies, such as clergy cover-ups or political entanglements, further disillusioned the faithful, reinforcing perceptions that institutional loyalty supplanted genuine faith and practical judgment. In this view, early church models of shared eldership gave way to monarchy bishops by the 2nd and 3rd centuries, prioritizing unity over individual moral intuition. It's sad. It's sad. It makes even more sense why Trump ran on the need for common sense. But people just want their they just, it's spiritual laziness that the church started. You'd think that if you were a church that had any kind of understanding of God, whether the Catholic or I don't care, you would think, how am I really serving God? Especially the Catholic Church, all they've ever done is protect themselves. They're the most opposite example of what Christ was in every way. But, it's the beast, so. At least the Protestants knew that once, But that was the most important part, yet all they're doing ever since, all this ecumenical, that the Protestants now and the evangelical, all of them doing together, which is bringing all the religions together. It's like, bring yourselves all together and then dismantle yourselves. But that will never happen because it's all about them. It's not about God. Even if the Protestants that came here, it was about God to them. But what it is today, no. But of course it was going to end up falling. It was going to end up having all these scandals because now all the people in the church decided, no, we all have to believe the same thing about what Scripture means. That's not what God wanted. He wanted you to think. And if you sought Him, He would help you seek the true answers and interpretation. How did none of them get it?